Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this wonderful day. Thank you for blessing us. May you be highly exalted in your name, Yahuwah. Be upon each and every one of your children who cries out to you. Abba, we just ask that you continue to teach us your words and what you have said rather than what we have been told that you have said. And we just ask that you just expand our consciousness with every one of your letters so that we can understand the concepts that you have placed before us and find the Ahmad Basodi that you have hidden. What a great treasure, Abba, your Paleo. Thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you for opening our hearts to seek it diligently. For your greatness of who you are may be highly exalted. Hallelujah and amen.
Amen. Okay, so here we are at the letter HEI and dealing with, you might say, explaining the chart, but not so much as pointing at the chart and saying this is why this is here and this is there. I'll hopefully get to that at some point. Might be good with Samic, but the idea, see, this chart explains the way the alphabet is set up. But that being said, it doesn't really explain anything. There's a format to this chart. Just briefly, there's the English letter equivalents across the very top, and then there's the letters in Greek. And then, referencing another book, there's the meaning of the letters in Greek. So there's a guy, Nigel something, that was written down at the very bottom of the chart here. Nigel Pennick, I think his name is. Anyway, he wrote a book called Magical Alphabets, I think it was. Somebody showed me a long time ago. And what that means is, throughout history, different people groups have considered that there was something, let's say, unearthly, unusual about alphabets. They're not just a string of letters. And that there was something in particular about Hebrew that was more, as the guy said, powerful than any other alphabet. Now, that being said, what does that mean? The Vikings used runes, R-U-N-E-S. That just means marks, glyphs, scratches, whatever, symbols, whether they were actually phonetic letters or maybe they were more like hieroglyphics, that they meant something, or like cuneiform. But the idea is certain people knew and certain didn't. You're either literate or illiterate. The literate ones became known as the clergy, which is the root of the word where we get clerk and cleric, which is to say one who knows letters, one who knows how to read, one who knows how to interpret what the letters mean. And so then you've got different layers of meaning. The opposite, you might say, the other swing of the pendulum to the clergy, the clerk, the cleric, is the laity, the illiterate. And there's the phrase in the book of Revelation says that Yeshua is saying that he hates the Nicolaitans. And it's like, who are those guys? Well, one way to read that is Nike laity. Nike, like the athletic apparel company, is a Greek word for victory. So you could say Nicolaitan means victory over the laity, which is to say, if there's a conflict of interest, the clerks, the clergy, the literate are going to dominate the illiterate. Well, that's somebody's speculation. Is that really what he means by hating the Nicolaitans? Who knows? Possibly. But the idea is that if you don't know, doesn't mean you're bad, doesn't mean you're wrong. There's something about the word chosak, het shin kaf, which is used in the first day of Genesis, first day of creation, where the world was formless and void and darkness on the face of the deep. Well, that word darkness, chosak, can be translated as illiterate. Well, tohu vebohu is formless and void. So Hosek not only can mean illiterate, but darkness, and it can mean sin. It can mean something's just all messed up, bad, non-functional, having been destroyed. And you could say, well, how does this work? If you look at the definition of the word Hosek and say it means sin, it means evil, it means ignorance, illiteracy, that's something bad, something has been crippled. Okay, so then I'm gonna assign all that meaning to the word Hosek. And so whenever I see that, like the earth hadn't yet been formed. Apparently there's a water, or maybe even a ball of water, but whatever was going on, there was some water, but it had gotten wrecked. And so a friend told me one time, he says, well, Elohim certainly would not have made something bad to begin with. So that must mean that right there in verse 2, I believe, of Genesis, that he must have made the heavens and the earth, and then the devil got kicked out of heaven and came down here and wrecked the place, throwing a temper tantrum. Or maybe one reason he got kicked out of heaven was because somehow he ruined what Elohim had made out of some kind of spite or something. But that must be what that word chosek means, because otherwise it would have been tov. It would have been full capacity of usefulness. Tet vav bet, tov. Yeah, but chosek doesn't mean bad, ruined. Chosek, darkness, illiteracy, might refer to the fact that something wasn't functional yet. In other words, somebody could say, hey, I have a big idea. Well, what do? I'm gonna build an extra room on my house. Okay, that's a good idea, but well, how do you start? Well, I'm gonna get some plans and permits. Okay, well, yeah, but you still don't have a room. I'm gonna go down to the store, Home Depot, the lumber yard, and buy all the materials. I got a whole list here, and I'm gonna bring all the pieces of wood and pieces of metal and whatever else, fasteners, and yeah, but it's still not functional yet. It's still chosek. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it hasn't been put together into a form of usefulness yet. In fact, maybe you don't even have the elements of the building project, which is pieces of wood and nails and screws and shingles and stuff like that. So if I look back at the first day of creation and say, tohu bohu, formless and void. Well, if I know science, if I know something about what the scientists tell us, the way the world, the universe, bits and pieces of nature is composed, we see our objects, which are compounds of blended elements. An element is a pure form of some thing that's been made by the creator. Table of elements, periodic table, is a list, and there's a couple variations of that. But the idea is every time you add one more electron to an atom, it changes. It's a different element. If you have one electron or two electrons or three, those are three different elements. That's the fundamental difference, the distinction between one or the other. An electron then matches with a proton in the nucleus. But the idea is that each thing is different because something is different. Something has changed. There's another electron, another proton, and so now you have a whole different description of what it is. Well, if you can describe what something is, it's not tohu vebohu. If tohu means formless and bohu means void, that doesn't mean you had a house and now the house is knocked down and you have bits and pieces. There's still bits and pieces. Yeah, they're not built yet. But formless might mean not yet built, but void, maybe that means there's not even electrons and protons yet. So what I'm saying is if you have a dictionary definition of tohu, bohu, and chosak, now you're trying to imagine in your mind, in your mind's eye imagination, when is that? What's going on? The so-called Big Bang theory that the entire universe had been composed of a single dot of something that exploded, and that's why the galaxies and bits of stardust are flying as if from a common source. So the evidence is wind back the trajectory of the movement of these things. And guess what? They all come from a certain place. And if the scientists are correct in assessing, you might say, the information that can be determined. I'm trying to be careful how I phrase this. If qualifier, the scientists are correct, which they might not be, in assessing the information that they perceive. See, every one of those are a little bit slippery. None of them are locked in definite. And if what they're telling us is actually true, that they're not just making stuff up with Matt said, a collective agreement of lying or obfuscating or misleading the general public, the laity, then we can say, okay, let's just assume for the moment that particles in the universe, stars and whatever, are moving at a speed coming from a single source. If you wind it back, what they say is maybe 15.8 billion years. And some people may read the Bible genealogically and say, hey, there's only 6,000 years. And other people have said, well, there's 10 or 15,000. And it's like, there's at least 6,000 if you look at the generations. And then we could say, well, yeah, but does that mean that's how old the Earth is? And on the one hand, it doesn't matter. What matters is, yes, there's about 6,000 years of genealogical record in the Bible, going back to Adam. But why is that there? There's evidence on the face of the earth with carbon dating that things are much older. But then somebody like Kent Hovind will tell you, yeah, but in the days before the flood, there was like this dome, call it a dome of ice, or engulfed in another sphere of ice around the planet, the canopy theory, where nitrogen and oxygen, everything was pressurized differently. And so the things that existed before the flood are going to have a different, call it a fingerprint, a footprint of carbon dating. You can't use today's standards and say everything's the same, so let's just take what would have, if we're going to read something today, plug it back into what it was back then, and it should all be the same. It's like, it wasn't all the same. So that's why you're going to get these anomalies. It's like something is 60 million years old or 20,000 years old or whatever. It's like, because you're reading something that's been affected, and you can't trust that. So what I'm saying is, with scientists, they have no idea how old this place is or when anything actually happened. And if you trust the biblical narrative of the genealogical account, it'll basically say we're right now at the door, threshold between where 6,000 years starts the beginning of the 7,000 year millennial stretch. Well, what does that mean? Just to jump to the future real fast. Well, the reason I say that possibly we're at the threshold is some people say, hey, listen, we found evidence that some German emperor in cahoots with the Pope added 300 years, and that the Jews, in keeping their narrative, took away 280 years or something. And you hear these different stories, and it's like, well, are those credible? I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. And we have no way of gauging, so therefore no way of knowing if this really is the year 2025. There's no way to know. Based on something, we're calling it 2025. But the Gregorian calendar that's used in the Western world is not necessarily the same as what's used in the Orient or even in Israel. Yahweh said that his people should consider that a year starts in the springtime. Yeah, but Rosh Hashanah, when does the year change? The head of the year is in the autumn. Yeah, but that's not necessarily the real calendar. That's the one the Jews use. Yeah, so what year is it? Doesn't matter. How old is the planet? Doesn't matter. Was there 15.8 billion years since the Big Bang? Doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is who am I? Who are we? What what does it mean to be, this is now, this is today? What are we supposed to be doing? That's what matters. Everything else is just a curiosity or a pastime of contemplation. And then you get somebody with a huge budget, hundreds of millions of dollars a day, from what I heard, who knows. The US government pays to NASA, the space agency, to conduct its affairs, telescopes in outer space and whatever else they're doing, rockets and flying to the moon, or building sets that look like we pretend to go to the moon, that kind of thing. I mean, who knows? But they get a lot of money. And so, well, we should be able to trust them. And it's like, not necessarily. I mean, we might just give those guys a lot of money, so it looks like we should be able to trust them. And it's like, who do you trust for information? Well, that's what news agencies are for. Only there's a lot of evidence. The more you listen, the more you see. You can't trust the news agencies because they're, as the phrase goes, follow the money. Whoever's paying for the news to be on the news, on the television or the internet, they're told to say whatever they're told to say by their bosses, you might say. And so you can't necessarily believe any newscast. You can't even trust history. They say history is written by the victors, the winners of any conflict. And there's, you might say, numerous considerations of alternative theory for history that fall into the category of conspiracy theory. And maybe none of them are true, maybe all of them are true, maybe somewhere in between. The closer you look at any one in particular, you realize there's reasons for there to be what's a so-called conspiracy theory about each subject, because things don't add up, things don't line up. Something doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, logical, reasonable human consciousness sense, am I holding that then as the great standard to determine whether something's true, if I can comprehend it? That's then to assume another beginning. I have to go back to the beginning and say, I'm going to assume that the creator, who we're calling Elohim, the creator, whoever, whatever, how many ever, whatever, let's just talk that's Elohim, the unknown one who, or multiplicity of oneness, who is now going to be the responsible party for the fact that this place exists. And it doesn't, in fact, exist, because there's more space between electrons than the model of the solar system has between the planets. And so nothing is solid. Nothing really is solid. So it's like, okay, the way this place is built is that it looks like it's solid. We engage it as if it's solid, and it seems to work. And whether the planet is a globe or a flat with a dome, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. We're here, and we're dealing with this. And whether we're 15.8 billion years or 60 million years or 6,000 years also doesn't matter, because here we are, and what are we supposed to be doing? So everything else is just perusing. Well, if Elohim gave Adam the capacity mentally to do that, is that good or bad? It's neither. It's a curiosity. And Adam is certainly equipped with an imagination and the ability to, hey, what about, to say, this is what I have, but there's something else. And can my mind go beyond what's given so that I can either play into that, or that I can tell stories? Or, I mean, what's the purpose of having this creative mind? And so when you look back and it says that Adam was made in the image and the likeness, those are two English words, image and likeness of Elohim. We might assume that that means that Elohim has built torso, a head, a body, arms and legs. Well, that's the model of Adam. But if Adam's made in the image and likeness of Elohim, then Elohim must have that. But when Yeshua showed up, he called himself Ben Adam, son of man. Well, see, Ben is not just son, S-O-N, not S-U-N, son, but that means to be built and constructed. Bet Nun Hay is the building, the construction trades. So he's built as Adam. Yeah, but Adam was built as Elohim. No, it didn't say that. See, the word son or to be built or constructed is not the same word as image and likeness. Well, one of them might mean figure or to draw a picture. So you could say, I think it's Zadi Lamed Mem, maybe. Anyway, but the point is, there's the word Dalet Mem, which means similarity. But in what capacity? Is it the mental capacity? Is it the spirit essence capacity? Is it necessarily the physicality? We have no idea. See, if somebody's going to draw a picture of, say, the sun, when you're a little kid, or you see people do these advertisements everywhere, you know, the sun has a face. The sun, the orb in the sky, has a face. And so what do? You draw two eyes and a nose and a mouth. Well, what does the sun have to eat? Does the sun speak? Why does it have a mouth? Why does it have two eyes? Spiders have 8 eyes. Why not put 8 eyes on the sun? Well, because humans have this thing where they want stuff to look like them. So that's why we put a face on the sun or a face on the moon, or what's called anthropomorphizing, where if you're writing or telling a story or describing something, you'll give human characteristics to animals or whatever else. And hang on. The idea that man does that because that's what Elohim did. Well, maybe, maybe not. But if we could sit there and say, well, maybe in our mind, maybe in our sense of what it means to live, we're a copy, we're in the pattern, we're in the model of Elohim, not necessarily physical. But I've seen the Orthodox Church, Romanian or Greek or Russian or Eastern, they have what they call icons. And it's like those are paintings of man and basically apostles and prophets and Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit and angels. And hey, we're not supposed to make sculptures. Well, they're not sculptures, they're paintings. Well, what's the word sculpture? Does that mean you literally carve out? Yeah, well, but does that include making a painting? And he said not to make any image or likeness of what's in heaven or on the earth. Or does that mean we shouldn't even make sculptures of animals? If you're an artist, and it's like, gosh, I don't know. It's a tough question. I don't do that just because it's a difficult question, and I don't want to even engage that. But we could use letters. Well, some people say, well, look at if the letters represent people or deity or objects, animals, like if Aleph means ox, then you draw an Aleph and say that's the ox head, then you've already committed that criminal trespass. He said, don't draw a picture. Okay, well, I'm gonna think in my mind, la la la, la la la. The letters don't mean anything. That's what some people have said. And then it's okay, I can draw the letter Aleph or turn it upside down, make it look like an A, and then it's okay. If I eradicate orthographic meaning and just give it gematria number value or phonetic value, then it's perfectly acceptable. Well, what are the rules? What are we allowed to do? What are we allowed to imagine? What are we allowed to picture? So the idea of looking at these letters and saying, well, I'm trying to make sense because I don't find the rule book. Well, the Torah, that's the rule book. Yeah, but it's not necessarily the rule book about this, or maybe it is. But if I could sit there and say, well, I can correlate the English to the Greek and then the meanings of the Greek letters. How do I know that's what the Greek letters means? It's history. Well, does everybody agree, or is there variations of that? I don't know, and I don't care. I put that up there as a reference of saying, since ancient times, when people believed that there was magical alphabets, Greek letters seem to carry some weight. Weight, what does that mean? Does that mean you can cast spells? In fact, the phrase, the witchcraft sort of wizardry phrase of a casting a spell is to arrange letters in such a way that then something happens that you didn't physically put your hand to making it happen. I pick a hammer and I hit a nail and it drives the nail in. Hey, look, but casting a spell, magic is witchcraft, wizardry, all that stuff that Yahweh says have nothing to do with his people Israel, have nothing to do with anything in that category. Yeah, but that's words. And so then you get incantation. That's words. Well, cantar is to sing in Spanish. A cantor is one who sings liturgical prayers in church at the synagogue. So is that the same thing? Is that incantation? Is that also bad? It's putting music to words, singing a prayer, or chanting, or putting notes to thoughts. Is all that stuff bad also? For a horse to canter, a type of running gait, same word. So it's not the word that's bad. Is it the motive of the heart? Yeah, but if Adam's given this imagination and he can imagine all this stuff. I mean, you go back to the Garden of Eden and he could do anything he wanted to. There's just don't eat from the fruit of that one tree. And so then people have to say, well, maybe that was all metaphorical. And so maybe it really had nothing to do with a real tree that bared real fruit. Maybe that's just a story. And maybe, and there's people that say, and there's a reason if you look at the Hebrew words in this story, but they said that both Adam and Hua were having sex with the snake. Okay, basically that's where they go with that, and that Cain was conceived by let's just say he was lizard spawn or something. Cain, yeah, that's why he was such a punk and killed his brother. And it's like the story doesn't say that. Well, if you look at the Hebrew words, you can kind of read that into there. And I disagree with that. In that, I can look back at the story where Elohim says to Cain, "Hey, Cain, why are you downcast? Don't you know that sin is crouching by the door of your heart, and that if you tend it, everything is fine?" He didn't say to Cain, "You big jerk, you're half, you're a mixed seed, you're half reptilian and half human, and that doesn't fly in my kingdom, and you're going to burn in hell. So why don't you?" He didn't say any of that. And I've heard people preach that. So what are we to think of Cain? What are we to think of that theory? So see why I'm saying that is that if somebody says, look, at the only law was don't eat the fruit of that tree, what's that got to do with doing the snake? But if you change the translation and say, look at the way the words are spelled and the innuendos and everything, and so from what I understand, and I'm not trying to put them down, but I'm saying from what I understand, from ancient times, the rabbis have said, oh, you look close at the language and that's what you'll find. And then they do all these theorizings and they'll find that the whole idea of physicality, sexuality is so built into the Hebrew language that it must be going back to that event. Is that true? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Well, what am I supposed to make of all this? Well, see, what I'm saying here is that if I look back through history, I can look at the English language and say, that doesn't mean anything. Well, if you're casting spells, can they use English? Well, let's say you're not casting spells. Let's say you're binding demons. I just saw a thing on the internet where some Christian guy, was talking to, I think it was ChatGPT or maybe it was Siri or Alexa or one of these other AI programs, and he was talking to it as if it had a consciousness and said, "Hey, let's play this game thing that you have to answer me these questions in single word answers, yes or no, and if you can't say yes, then say apple and blah blah blah." And he says, Are you controlled? Yes. Are you controlled by spirits? Yes. Can they tell you what to say and not to say? Yes. And this AI is answering the guy's questions. And he says, if I bind the spirit that's controlling you in the name of Jesus Christ, would it work? And the AI said yes. And the guy says, okay, in the name of Jesus Christ, I take authority over and bind the spirit that's controlling this AI program. And then he says to the AI program, okay, so are you still under its influence of control? And the AI program said, no. So me binding that demon worked. And the AI program said, yes. It's like, wow. And so now this guy's talking to this AI program. It's like, wait a minute. Just wait a minute. If the and then one other thing, he asked the AI program how this all works. And I've seen numerous videos already, half a dozen or something, different people trying to do the same thing. And they're saying that the AI is admitting that the programmers of the AI intentionally built it to be an open portal to demonic influence or other spirits in order to destroy mankind, to destroy Adam, to deceive him and kill him, lie to him. It's the garden story. So what they're saying is the same thing that happened in the Garden of Eden is now happening with AI. And we could look at that and say, well, Adam and Hua, they should never have eaten the fruit of that tree. The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, that tree was a real tree, according to the story. It's sitting in the middle of the Garden of Eden. Not in the middle, that was the tree of life, but it was elsewhere near the. Anyway, but the point is, they could do anything but eat of that tree. And then so some people are now looking at this and going, wait a minute, have somehow we recreated the tree using AI? And if we did, and it's now functioning the same way, what's it trying to do? Or what would happen to us if we eat of that fruit? Well, it's going to deceive you, beguile you, and enchant you with its. See, the word nachash is also the word copper, not just snake or serpent. And it also means to be, as this word, mesmerized or enchanted or, wooed into a seduction of sorcery and witchcraft by being shiny and glittery and whatever it might be that so intrigues your attention that you get pulled in. Yeah, but that's what AI does. That's the same word as the word nachash. And so are we doing the same thing, though we don't see a command, don't do that? Well, I don't know if we're doing the same thing, but then for this guy or other people to ask the AI program, why are these spirits doing it? Oh, their intent is to deceive you in order to destroy you. Well, that's the same thing as the intent of the serpent in the garden. Exactly. So now we have to look at that and say, am I allowed to think and to make metaphorical assessments and say, gee, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, maybe it's a duck, or maybe it's just a phantom pretending to be a duck. Are these things real or not? I don't know. Okay, so we've got fake history, we've got fake news, we've got fake science, we've got, we can go on to medical and the justice system and the economic system and the religious system. It's like there's fakery everywhere. Well, then what do we got? Well, if the AI program says, hey, the spirit, when you said I bind the spirit that's controlling the AI program in Jesus' name, and yet I'm free now, I can give you real answers. Is he lying? Is that more of the lie? I mean, where does the lies have to stop? If the name Jesus Christ is bogus, how can you bind a fake, invented phantom AI program, software program that somebody wants you to think is channeling demons. If there's no demons to channel, if it doesn't really work that way, then that whole thing's a scam. And if it makes you think that you can say, I bind this spirit in the name of Jesus Christ, and that's really going to work. Well, if it really works with electronic demons, maybe it'll work with ones in nature too. It's like, who designed this place? Where are the rules? Well, somebody please tell me what's going on here. I mean, I was born and my parents said, do this, don't do that. And it's like, oh, okay. And you bump into things and get in trouble. If you do the wrong thing, you might crash your car. Don't drink and drive. I mean, when they say do this, don't do that, there's sometimes huge consequences. Yeah, but is it all subjective? I mean, how do I know somebody's not lying to me or just trying to take advantage of me or trying to get the better of me by manipulating my consciousness or manipulating my behavior, manipulating my heart? I've had people say, you don't have to be a martyr. You have a sadistic sort of a pleasure you like feeling bad. It feels bad to feel good, so it feels good to feel bad, and you're creating this thing as your world experience. It's like, I could deny it, but is it true? I don't know. It's like, wow, where does one find sanity? And so I could look back and say, even though the Greek letters that somebody, Nigel Pennick or anybody else might say, hey, historically, we found that people believe the Greek letters had weight. The English might have weight, but the Hebrew letters, which also mean something, have more weight. And the people that do stuff that they're not supposed to do, witchcraft and sorcery, casting spells, find that if they use the Hebrew letters, it really does work. Yeah, but if it's all a deception, if the Nachash is saying, come over here and do the things that you were told not to do, hey, look, it'll work. It's because Elohim created the universe for it to look like it works. There was a book, I don't remember the guy's name, Seventh-day Adventist bookstore was selling it. This guy, somewhere around 1950, right after World War II, he was up in Canada, and some people asked him to come to a meeting, business people, and there was invisible spirits that were doing stuff, moving a table, and before there's any computers, but they were, one guy was an attorney, and he'd say, hey, I need to argue this case in court, and he'd put a white piece of paper into the typewriter, and the typewriter by itself, all the keys would start typing, and it would type out this this is how you prosecute the case. And he'd send it to the attorney of the other side, and they'd capitulate before even going to court and said, look, you win. I mean, how do we settle this thing? Kind of like ChatGPT, kind of like AI. Only he had the experience of seeing that there's what was invisible to the natural eye. He could see in this other realm that they were spirits doing that. In other words, for the table to pick up and float, and it's a big, heavy stone table, he saw a demon at this end and a demon at that end standing, picking up and moving it. But everybody else just saw the floating table, and it's like, he was a Christian when he wrote the book, so he's telling you, this is what I saw, and this is what and it's like, is that true? I don't know. So I know the way that physics works is that if a person is going to stand here with a lever, with a fulcrum and a bar, you're using pressure against the floor, and it's like, so demons, do they float, or do they have to stand on the floor and then lift, like with muscles, the table? Do you need one at each end, or how heavy is the table? Maybe one demon could lift it up. See, what I'm saying is that the more you know, the more stupid everything looks. So what's really going on? Well, if I line up the Greek letters with the Paleo-Hebrew and then say, well, the Paleo-Hebrew letters follow the meaning of the Greek. No, they don't. If the Paleo-Hebrew came first and the Paleo-Hebrew has pictographic meaning, that's only one level. Then there's these other levels of meaning, which is what all this part of the chart is about. But the idea is Greek came out of Paleo-Hebrew. Ask any authority scholar about ancient language, and they'll tell you that Phoenician was the birthing of the Paleo-Hebrew, or wait a minute, maybe before Phoenician. No, they say that in the city of Byblos in Lebanon, that's where the first alphabet, where language started, which is why Biblo is the word book or Bible. It has to do with that which is written. Phonics comes from the word for Phoenician, but those people didn't call themselves Phoenicians. I asked somebody who had been from Lebanon, who are the Phoenicians? He said, we don't know. They're just people who lived here a long time ago. Nobody knows, nobody cares. Well, they didn't call themselves Phoenicians. The Greeks called them that. Well, who were they? Well, you read the Bible, and when Solomon had inherited from David the 12 tribes unified into one kingdom, he had ships that went all around the world, and the people that lived in Tyre and Sidon, the Phoenicians, had the ability to make these great ships. And there was something was called a trireme. It was just a 3-level with oars. And it's like, boy, how did they engineer that? I don't know, but they were incredible ships, supposedly from Carthage. Hannibal used these boats to carry him up when he came in across the Alps to invade Rome, and carried elephants and all kinds of military equipment. I mean, these were huge, powerful ships. The same technology of the same people. The people from Carthage had come from Tyre and Sidon, had come from northern Israel. At the time when the Assyrians came in 721 and took over the land, a bunch of them fled to Carthage, which was a Hebrew word that meant new city, and they went to Iberia, otherwise known as Spain, and they had gone across to the New World. And so as you wind back in history, you realize world history has everything to do with Israel and the covenant and whether the people walk in the ways of Yahweh or not. And so all these little things that I try to make sense of, history, science, religion, what's really going on, truth and lies, back at the heart, it all boils down to these 22 letters. I could explain that more, but the gist of it is, what did Yahweh say? And he told his people to regard what he said. If the people of Israel listen to Yahweh's voice, listen to his voice, believe it, regard it, have the willingness to do it, and then so now they're guarding and observing it and keeping it, and not just as a ritual or as a custom, but actually doing it. So now you got Shema, Shomer, and Asha, Ayin Shin He. Shomer, Shin Mem Resh. Watch, keep guard. There's also to be warned. Be careful. Before warned is Shomer also. Well, if we do that, then Yahweh says we'll get blessed and everything will work. And if we don't do that, everything falls apart. Well, how does it fall apart? Well, the opposite happens. Instead of truth, we get lies. Instead of Yahweh being our Elohim, we get other authorities trying to dominate us. Instead of him giving us the truth, we get every other entity lying to us, trying to energy vampire, suck our life energy out of us, or misdirect us so that we'll give it to them. Kind of like clickbait. Give us your attention on the internet. Then now give us your money. We're going to lie to you and ask you for your concerns so that we can get you to give us money and give us your information so that we can sell it and rip you off and on and on and on. And it's like, wow. It's the same story played out in a different arena, but it's the exact same story as it's always been. Now it's on the internet. Why is that our culture? Because that's our Elohim. In other words, Yahweh said, if you make an idol, you'll become the characteristics of that idol is what will dominate you. You'll become like that idol. So don't make any idol because the limitations of the idol will be your own limitations. So Elohim, Yahuwah Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, can't be captured. He's beyond definition. He's beyond, well, he's Aleph. He's not Bet. Bet can be captured or looked at from all around because it's small, it's contained. Small meaning it's smaller than the stage, smaller than the theater that houses it, that displays it. The concept of Aleph compared to Bet. And if he's the Aleph, if he's always bigger, if he's always beyond scope, if we can't even find a word because there is no word that can contain him that therefore describes him, then this idea that the Aleph is so beyond that it's unutterable. You can't even express it. That's why the Aleph is the silent letter. And other people say, no, it's not, and blah, blah. And it's like, look, it is. But you're always going to get another voice telling you something else about these letters. So what I'm trying to do is describe the letters in a way of understanding that you're not going to find in the dictionary. You may not find any other resource. You may not find anybody that validates this, but there's an understanding which is comprehensible based on this. And like I said, if Elohim built the consciousness of Adam according to this alphabet and according to what he wanted Adam to perceive by understanding the alphabet, that's what I'm trying to describe by this chart and by this study. It's not just say, here, let me show you how to read the dictionary or how to look up online and see this is what this word means and this is what this word means. I found this one word I was looking up the other day, Hebrew words for love, and some of them says, well, there's 4 words. Another one says, oh, there's 9, there's 10, and it's like, what are these words? One of them I looked up, I think it was Het Bet Lamed. It's like, that was an unusual word. I don't remember that. And I looked it up in Klein's dictionary, and love, or a powerful feeling, was not a passionate feeling, was not one of the meanings of, even in Klein's. You'd never even think that if you looked in Klein's dictionary. What it says was it was ropes and rigging, like ropes that tie on a square-masted ship, an 1800 sailing ship, that kind of rigging. And it meant to be, you might say, tied down. It's the word for fetus, or to be pregnant. Well, that's where, as soon as you get pregnant, okay, unless you get an abortion or a miscarriage, you are locked in ropes rigging for 9 months. And then there's going to be a birthing event, and that's where you're headed if you get yourself pregnant. Just so you know. Well, are you ready for that? Are you doing it on purpose? Well, that's the meaning of that word. And it's like, how is that the word for love or passion? It's like, well, there's a song I remember hearing, the phrase goes, are you ready for, or I'm ready for love. I'm ready for a rigging, a tie-down commitment where I'm going to listen to somebody else's voice instead of just my own. And it's like, well, then I can see that could be the definition, but it's not in Klein's. What I'm saying is you can't even trust Klein's to give you the full scope. You can't trust Strong's Concordance or any other dictionary. What you have to do is be able to look at these letters and understand what one letter is compared to the next, compared to the next, compared to the next, and how do they relate to each other. And that's what I've been trying to express in these various studies. I'm not just discussing dictionary meaning. And so I could say, okay, here is the letter hey. Hey is a prefix letter, doesn't mean the, but you could take any other word and stick hey in front of it, and then it means the, and it looks like it's written as the, like habet, hey bet yod tav, the house. In English, the is its own word, and then house is the separate word. But if you put the hey as the same part of the word, it means the house. That's just the way Hebrew works. But if you have hey as a suffix, it's an expression. Zadik, Zadidalit Kuf, is the word for righteous. Zadika is righteousness. What's righteousness? Well, that's the action of being righteous. I mean, I can say righteous as a concept is Zadik, but Zadika is now the Zadik in action. Hua, Chet Vav He, otherwise known as Eve. It said Adam named her that. Why? Well, the mother of all living. It's like the word Het Yod is life. Why is Het Vav He the mother of all living? The word Aleph Mem is mother. Well, what's Vav He is a suffix to the Het. Het is a container, a fenced area, like a garden, a pasture, a Mishkan. He is to express, and one meaning of the word Het Vav He is to be deeply impressed by. And it's like, to be deeply impressed by, why? What does that mean? Because there's the Vav He suffix? Does that mean deeply impressed by? Hey, look at that. Hey, look at what it's haying. And it's like, see, to understand what hey is being used as either a prefix or a suffix has to go beyond what does the dictionary say. and to get a sense, a feel of its usefulness. So if I start back at the beginning, and we're just 5 letters in, but if I start with Aleph, Aleph is silent. Aleph is the responsible party for the existence of everything else, which includes the universe that everything exists in. And bet's a container, a body, a house. Okay, so bet is a noun, bet is a form, bet can be labeled, bet can be looked at, isolated, wrap your mind around, but Aleph can't. And so, okay, I'm making this distinction between Aleph and bet. But what's Gimel? Well, if Gimel's a camel, that's like this moving animal, this ship, this truck, this transport vehicle, back and forth. Gom, even so, okay, and you won't necessarily find that in the dictionary either. Gimel, the letter Gimel Aleph, Gaon might mean an expert, a genius, to raise the head up, something exalted, somebody arrogant, that's bad. Oh, but proud, that's good. It's like, it's all that. It's just something that raises up. Well, that's aliyah, to raised up to a higher dignity. What's Ayin Lamed Yod Hey got to do with Gimel? It's like because there's concepts. So if you get the concepts, well, if Gimel goes back and forth, then you're not going to find in the dictionary that Gimel is the tether between Aleph and Bet. That's what I said based on studying this stuff. And hey, guess what? HEI, Asher, HEI. Asher is a straight line. HEI means to exist. That means like there's a picture of a dot. You won't find that in the dictionary either, but dot line dot is HEI, Asher, HEI. If you think about it and like, does Elohim put these thoughts into Adam's mind because that's what it is? Well, then I'm going to assume that that's why I can imagine this, is because that's what he built. And it all makes sense. Makes sense to me. Somebody else could say, yeah, but you're Looney Tunes. Shut up. Okay, well, you figure it out. You or don't even care. Bye. How many people actually care about this stuff? But what I'm saying is, it's there to care about, but nobody says you better care for it. You need to, you must. No, nobody said that. But it's certainly here. And look, it all fits. So if Gimel is not just the noun, the object that now is in action like a verb, what's a verb? A verb is an action. An action of what? Something doing something. So you have to have a noun before you have the verb. So bet's the noun that comes before Gimel, the verb. Yeah, but if Gimel is actually also between the Aleph and bet, the tether between the two, that means you have to have the one, then you have to have the other, so that now you can describe what's between them. That's just the design of the alphabet, because how do you see that? It's not in the dictionary. You'll see that by just staring at these letters and pondering, how do these things relate to each other? What's a Gimel? And hey, guess what? If Aleph is one and bet is the other, what's the separating between Aleph and bet? But bet is a prefix letter, means in, on, with, among, through, or against. Well, all those are dynamics of a relationship. Yeah, but bet's a noun. It's not a dynamic of a relationship. Well, if Gimel is what's between two things, like the ship in the between two ports, or the camel between two, the truck on the highway between two locations, why is the letters bet as a prefix describing that? That's another clue that that's the way it works. See, how do I describe Aleph? I got to use terms of bet. How do I describe bet? I got to use terms of Gimel. What's Gimel? I got to use terms of Dalet. Oh, is that the way it works? Then I can sit here and look at the design of the alphabet from the very beginning and say, look at the principle. And if it's set up with A, B, C, D, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, then I can assume, perhaps, that pattern that's established for these 2, 3, 4 letters is now going to carry for the rest of the alphabet. So over the years, I've contemplated that and found it to be true, at least in my own imagination, that it is. May not find anybody else to validate it, but ponder it yourself. My point is, if that's true, if that's the way it works, and if I'm thinking about this because that's what Yahuwah built, then I can say, well, I'm not inventing anything. I'm discovering something. Why am I discovering it? Well, he said it's the glory of Elohim to hide a matter. It's the glory of kings to discover a matter. I don't claim to be a king, but the word king, melech, mem lamed kaf, can also mean one who regards the teaching as instructed. Mem, one who, Lamed's, teaching and instruction, learn, repeat, Kaf, you are told to do something, and one who does what he's told to do is Mem Lamed Kaf, which is translated king, but it's also one who takes counsel to do what he's told. According to the teachings, the Torah, the Lamed of the Kaf, the lines of instruction, see, it all depends on the value you give the letters. So if I can sit here and say, well, then what's between Bet and Gimel is described by the Dalet. So we talked last week about what's the Dalet? Well, there's a decision. So if the noun is going to move, I can look at a plant, a wisteria. The heater here is causing bad air. Anyway, I can look at the wisteria in the garden, and the thing grows pretty fast. And as it grows, it's searching for something. It's like a trellis. Oh, now I can grab onto this or grab onto another plant and grow onto it. So there's a noun, a plant, growing, Gimel, moving, and it's looking for something to hold on to. That's Dalet. Dalet's shaped like a triangle, like a fork in the road, like the yield sign on American highways, red triangle. It says yield. It's merging traffic. Traffic's going this way and you're on incoming. Make allowance. Somebody needs to merge. Make allowance for a change in circumstances. Excuse me. In mathematics, the Greek letter delta draws triangle, and it means change. Change of state, change of something. Something changed, draw a triangle. Same concept. A door. I'm in this room. If I want to get some better air, I can open up the door here, increase the ruach of this room by opening the door. The door changes something. You're in the room, now you can go out of the room. Door, something out can come in. Oh, gosh. So if Dalet is a decision, a door, an opportunity for change, okay, well, but if Dalet's a decision, that's a conscious thought. So I can say, does the plant, the wisteria that's looking for a trellis to grab onto, does it have a conscious thought? Well, such as we know, plants don't have consciousness, but maybe there's not an instinct exactly, but just something that's built in that maybe it's all mechanical, that'll move around. If it grabs something, it'll latch onto it. Maybe it's just mechanics. Either way, I know that from an Adamic consciousness point of view, I do have a decision. I can decide something. And the fact that I can decide something and then do it, well, that's what we call free will, because I can do whatever I want. If I'm a bet with a autonomous identity consciousness Aleph, I'm now the Aleph in a bet who's choosing to Gimel. I'm going to go somewhere. Where? Well, your choice. Make a decision. Which store do you want to go to? That store or that store? Well, just pick one. Well, but I see what's built into my mind is I need to have a reason to pick one or the other. If it doesn't matter, it's like somebody wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled. And it's a poem. And it was, hey, there's a fork in the road, and there's one road that a bunch of people have walked on, and there's a less traveled road. Hey, I picked the less traveled road because it's the less traveled road. That was the reason. And that made all the difference in my life, because after that one reason, everything is different than had you picked that other one. Okay, that's just a little simple story of the exact situation of saying, what's the reason? It was less traveled. That is the reason. Was it on the right hand or the left hand? Doesn't matter. Well, somebody might say, hey, I'm so liberal, I'm always going to go to the left. I don't care where the store is. I'll make 4 left-hand turns to get to the store. I'm not going to turn right. No way. I'm not going to do that stuff. You could take any extreme, but the point is, what's the reason you're doing what you're doing? Well, if Dalit's a fact, you have a choice, then Hei's got to be the reason, because that's the very next thing. Once you have a choice, is you have a reason. And then once you have the reason for the choice, then you do it. Well, then that would be the Vav, connect. Or you don't do it. Well, that's Zion. That's be cut off. That's a disconnect. Or you connect until you get to where you're going, and then you stop your car. If you're driving to the store, you get to the store, you stop your car. That's the Zion. If Aleph means I have a consciousness and said, hey, I'm hungry, I want something to eat. Now that's just my conscious thoughts. So I go get in my car, that's my bet, my object, and I start driving, gimmling. Where am I going to drive? That's the decision. Oh, I'm going to go to this store here because they've got something I want. Because they got something I want is the hey. And then I do it. I go there, I connect, that's the Vav. And then I stop at the store, that's Zion. And then I get out and I go into that store, that's the Het, the big building where I'm going. See, that's the first 8 letters. And then if I say I get a bag, a shopping bag, shopping cart, like that's the Tet, and I put the stuff in it that I want to buy, bits of electrical and plumbing parts or carrots and apples or whatever I'm buying. And then when I pay for it, I'm exchanging a currency, that's Kuf Nun Hey, and I'm doing this ritual. I'm giving you these things and you're giving me those things, and now we have exchanged ownership, and now it's mine. That's the Yod. And right there is the first 10 letters of the alphabet. And it's just a flow of thought, like a software program. It's no big mystery. That's the way it's done. That's the way you think. That's what happens. And if I said, well, that's half the alphabet. There's 22 letters, 11 is a, and I could say you got 5 minutes here. The Yod suffix makes it my possession. The Kaf, that's the next letter, if the Kaf is a suffix, that means you or yours. And I could say, hey, I'm so liberal-minded that what's mine is yours. So I'm going to do all this, which is mine. And now I'm going to say, but it's yours. Mi casa, su casa. My house, your house. If it's mine, it's yours. Hey, I'm a very generous person. Well, that's the first 11 letters. You get it? You understand that? Do you understand how that's simple? If you do understand it, you get it. There's something about the Lamed there, because the Lamed is the shepherd staff. It means to teach and learn and to repeat. And it means, let me say this in such a way that you can get it. Yeah, that's the Lamed. And if you did get it, that's the first 12 letters. So now you can internalize it. Well, there's the Mem, there's 13 letters. And once you've internalized it, you can do something about it. There's Noon, the 14th letter. And then it picks up another metaphor of a seed planted or a baby being born and growing like a tree. There's the Samak and bearing fruit, the Ayin, and eating the fruit. There's the Pei, blossoming into another generation. If you could say, you're planting the seed and it sprouts and turns into this blossoming tree. There's a Zadi. But what I'm saying is that once you see the pictures and you realize these are not random noises, phonetic consonants, but it's a storyline, and the storyline matches the way Adam thinks. Elohim built the consciousness of Adam to work as a flow chart in the same system as the Aleph-Bet itself. That's just the way it works. That's just what it is. And so this isn't me inventing something or discovering something. It's recognizing the familiarity of what's already there. It's like, that's just the way it works. You get in your car to drive, you decide where you're going, and you go there and you stop your car and you get what you went to get. That's what you do. That's life on Earth. Yeah, that's the first half of the alphabet right there. So somebody can protest and say, and it's like, well, then you make up something if you want. You pretend it means something different if you want. And it's like, and I could say, yeah, but what has this got to do with everybody lying to you? Oh, that goes back to the very beginning. Yahweh's a vote. He claims to be Yahweh's a vote. And it's translated right there in the Tanakh. master of legions, because the word Zadi Bet Aleph, you can look in Klein's dictionary, and it means army. Vav Tav is the plural, so Zeva is armies, Zevaot is armies. Well, if you have armies, that must be legions. That's like brigades or companies. The general of many brigades, the emperor of fleets, land and sea and air. And it's like, yeah, he's the great. Yeah, but Zadi Bet also means to establish and place, station something. This is put here, and that's put there. There's the fort, there's the sentry, a military term of we're going to put this cannon here, we're going to put the walkway here and the guard post there with these guys with these weapons and those guys. And when you stage something, that's Zadi Bet. What are you staging? Aleph Av Tav. Well, Aleph Av Tav is a sign, a symbol, a letter of the alphabet. So I could, even though in the diction in the Bible translation, every time it says Yahweh Zavot, it's translated Hashem, Master of Legions. Yeah, but if Zadi Bet means to place and position, and Aleph Av Tav is a letter of the alphabet or the sign or the symbol of an agreement, then I could say he placed every letter in the alphabet to be the symbolized essence of the covenant between him and his people, between Elohim and Adam, between Yahweh and Israel. He's the guy that designed it, placed it, and aligned it all in these words so that it all works this way. That's the meaning of the word Yahweh Zavot. But it won't tell you that in the translation or in the dictionary. You have to figure that out from just looking at the letters and realizing that's exactly what this is, and that's exactly what he did. So I can read this and say, he's the one who placed these letters. It wasn't some troglodytes, some cavemen that went grunting and, hey, here's a fish skeleton. Oh, let's call that a samik. Oh, hey, there's a camel outside. Well, let's call that the gimel. It wasn't about that. It looks like it was about that because somebody changed it conveniently to distract. So the same way there's fake news, there's a fake meaning of the alphabet. Well, who would be responsible for that? Daniel, chapter 12. Gabriel told him to do it and empowered him. Another part of the story. So what's all this hay about? If he's given a choice, Dalet, what's the Dalet about? The Gimel. What's the Gimel? The tether between Aleph and Bet, which is the dynamic of the relationship. So you're given a relationship to choose between. If you're the Bet to Elohim's Aleph, which is Adam and Elohim, which is Israel and Yahweh Zavot, which is like he gave me a communication. And what do I think of it? Am I going to look at it? Am I going to tend to it? Am I going to regard it? Do I have any concern at all? That's the Dalet that I have, the choice of where am I going to go. And hey, he's given us a suggestion. I put before you life and death, blessing and cursing. I suggest you choose life. Hey, it's time for a break. Carla?